Look, all I'm saying is Epstein Island at face value doesn't sound like that bad of a place. Like if somebody came up to you and said, "Hey, do you want to go to Epstein Island?" You'd be like, "Hell yeah, I want to go to Epstein Island. Who doesn't want to go to an island?" Then you go there and you figure out what's going on, and it's like, I don't know if this place is for me, and you never go back. I sure as hell wouldn't go back 24 times. One time, one and done, that's it. But yeah, no, that's the point I was trying to drive home there. So don't be judging me, all right, B-Mac? Don't judge me, all right? And I kind of feel the same way about like Guantanamo Bay. Somebody asked me if I wanted to go waterboarding at Guantanamo Bay. I'd be like, hell yeah, I want to go waterboarding at Guantanamo Bay. Who doesn't? Oh shit, we're recording. Welcome to Creepy and Weird. I am your host who boasts the most roast from coast to coast, and I like butter on my toast. My name is Hippie Steve, and thank you for watching another episode of this podcast. This will be a continuation of episode 1 where we talked about my experiences with the Ouija board. I know the title says demonic possession, but there's a pretty goddamn good reason why it says that. That's not just clickbait. So stick around for that. And before I begin, please like, subscribe, do whatever, comment. You could tell me to go F off in the comment section. I don't care. Just pay attention to me. That's it. All right? Now, with that being said, let's get this train rolling, this train of the absurd, and we're going to be talking about the continuation of what happened. Where we left off, I had those weird experiences after messing around with the Ouija board when I was younger, and I really didn't have anything else happen for a long time afterwards. To be honest with you, I never even correlated that all that stuff that happened to me when I was a kid, seeing my mom in the mirror, hearing the whispering in my voice, and all that fun stuff, had anything to do with the Ouija board. You know, I was a kid. You don't put 2 and 2 together when you're that young. It took me a very long time before I started realizing, yeah, it's probably had something to do with the Ouija board. So flash forward, really about 10 years later. You know, I'm at this point about 17, 18 years old. And my mom still liked messing around with that stupid Ouija board. And I was just getting together with my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time. And, you know, I guess my mom wanted to make a good impression. So she busted out the Ouija board and we were messing around with it. I was messing around with it too. Definitely didn't learn my lesson at that point. And even with my naivete, as far as realizing that this is probably not something I should mess around with, I remember sitting there and we were doing the Ouija board, and there was this voice in the back of my head that said, "Do not do this, just leave." And so I just kind of got up and told my girlfriend and my mom, I can't do this. I'm going to go in another room, have fun, see ya. I just walked away. I guess they probably just associated that I was, you know, kind of being a pussy. I don't know. I really don't care. But yeah, even with that, I was realizing that, you know, this wasn't good stuff. And like I said, I didn't have any weird experiences during that point until really I would start having weird scratches that would randomly pop up on my body. First, it would begin in my shoulders. Now, this was back when I, you know, still had a will to live and I worked out a lot. And, you know, I would do a lot of weights and stuff, putting stuff on my shoulder. So I always thought that maybe that had something to do with it. So I didn't think, oh, scratches, red flag. I thought, okay, maybe I'm working out a little bit too hard. You know, I'm clanging and banging, brother. But these scratches would continue on and off for, you know, being a teenager, going into my 20s. Nothing too concerning. I mean, I know scratches on your body are concerning, but I didn't know what was causing them. Maybe I'm scratching myself when I was sleeping. Like I said, maybe it was from working out too hard. You know, it was very hard to understand exactly what was going on. Really, when it became super concerning was probably, well, I have to get kind of into more personal stuff here. And I know people are going to be saying, oh, you know, Hippie Steve has another personal story about something paranormal that happened to him, and I'm going to be labeled as one of those guys. But I assure you that this is probably going to be like the last personal story I have as far as paranormal stuff that happened to me. At least paranormal stuff that happened to me while I was sober. Other stuff, that's a different story, but that will be another podcast for another day. How this gets very personal and actually very emotional is the fact that, unfortunately, my mom passed away in 2016. I was 29. Unfortunately, she passed away. She was only 20 years older than I was, so she was 49, so she passed away relatively young. That really messed with my mind. I mean, anytime you lose a parent, especially a mom, there's just something psychologically that happens in your head that's just, it's a mind fuck. Pardon the language. I know one thing I should be known for is my proper language, but it messes with your head. And even though I wouldn't say there was stuff that was super paranormal that was happening at that time, I think the grief over that period would lead to something more. Like I said, I was having scratches in my teens and in my 20s. Now I'm getting into my 30s. And that wasn't the only tragedy that we had happen. The year after that, in 2017, my wife's father, my father-in-law, the closest thing I ever had to a father figure, a person I loved to death, his name was Gary, I found him passed away on my 30th birthday. So that played with me a lot as well. And over time, unfortunately, there was more and more tragedies that would happen that would slowly start hindering my mind. I would actually start developing what I didn't know at the time, something called PTSD. When you start experiencing hardship after hardship after hardship, you just begin not to feel right in your own skin. And this isn't an episode about PTSD, so I'm not going to get into all the symptoms of that. But because of these hardships, because I was depressed, I was anxious, because I had to have, what you would call existential crisis. That's, you go online and people kind of brag about existential crisis and stuff like that. And it's not something to brag about, really. If you truly have what is called existential crisis, it is one of the worst things that you could experience aside from PTSD itself. And so these were things that I was having. And really the apex of it would be in 2002, where I lost somebody that was very special to me. And that just, if I thought I was in a pit of despair before all this, that sent me down a rabbit hole that I never anticipated. I had no light in my life. It was just every day was a struggle. With no exaggeration, I cried every day this was February 11th of 2022 when I had that tragedy. And I cried every day really throughout the rest of the year. It was alarming. And I'm not an extremely emotional person, at least not on the outside. I'm a very introverted person. I know it's kind of hard to see because I kind of have to be this boisterous person as a, podcast personality. But if you were to meet me in person, I'm not that emotional. I don't like crying in front of people. But in private, I cried a lot. And I think whatever was inside me, that had been inside me ever since I was a kid, was really wreaking havoc on that. These scratches that I would experience started becoming more and more aggressive. And the thing about, going back to the title, demonic possession, a lot of people kind of have this misconception of what a demonic possession really is, because of Hollywood and Linda Blair, doing the crab crawl and having oatmeal coming out of her mouth or her head spinning. A lot of people think that's what it is. But if you actually look into supposed accounts of demonic possessions, a lot of times they're not that obvious. It's very subtle. And it was obviously very subtle with me as well. But By this point, we're talking about August, September of 2022. These scratches were becoming extreme. It was like I was being attacked. I would just wake up with big scratches on my arm, on my legs, on my stomach. My legs felt like they were on fire at times. And these were so frequent that I would sit there and literally tell my wife, because I was feeling hotness in my leg, for example, and I would tell her, you see right there, in about 1 hour, there's going to be some scratches right there. They're not there at the time, but they will be there. And as sure as clockwork, within an hour, there were scratches on my leg. And this, this is very alarming, obviously. And I didn't know what to do. I felt like, because I'm not a religious person, I know it's cliche, but I guess I could call myself a spiritual person. But I didn't have anybody to turn to say, hey, do this or do that. I was kind of lost. And being in that mode of grief and existential crisis and almost feeling hopeless, I didn't know where to turn. And it wasn't anything that I was doing any type of research on to try to help myself. I was just kind of figuring this is just kind of what my life is going to be like right now. And I don't know if you want to call it by the grace of God, or I prefer more of synchronicity. I discovered something called the gateway process. And I didn't discover it at that time. I knew of it, a few years prior. But for some reason, something in my head was telling me, try this gateway process. Not as a way to get whatever was in me out of me, but I don't know, maybe to develop more of a spiritual connection, try to experience what Terence McKenna would call the other. And so I would try that. And luckily, with YouTube, all the recordings for the gateway process are on there. You could listen to every single one. It's quite the endeavor. And that's really what I felt like got me out of not only this existential crisis that I was in, but I do feel like it also helped get whatever was in me out of me. And yet again, I have to cut the podcast around this time. Only have so much time to do these, but this is going to be a great segue for our next episode, episode 3, which will be about the gateway process. I'll talk about my personal experiences with the gateway process. And I'll kind of, I'm not a science guy. I'm not like Bill Nye, even though I don't think he's a science guy either. I think he's like he's like an architect or something, like George Costanza. But I will go over my knowledge of how this works. Obviously, this deals with left brain, right brain hemisphere type deal, synchronization. There's that word again. And it's something that even to this day I still use, that I still have great admiration for. And I'm very lucky I found it. And I'm looking very forward to going into more detail about this wonderful practice. And hopefully anybody out there that's experiencing not necessarily demonic possession, but if you're experiencing depression or, existential crisis or anxiety, I really think this can help you. So that will be the next episode. Until next time, I leave you with the words I left you with last time. First and foremost, embrace the absurd and free your mind, and your ass will follow. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.